Hey everybody, Ben here from the Bonehead podcast, and welcome to Blood Bowl 7s. We are going through all the teams available in Blood Bowl 2020, and we're looking at just what teams you can run in a standard Blood Bowl 7s environment. Whether you're running a mini league or going to a resurrection tournament, we are going to be looking at the best player choices for your 7s team. Now on this episode, we are going to be looking at a team that has had a very small opportunity to play any Blood Bowl 7s at all, which is awesome. So we are looking at the first of a few brand new teams basically to Blood Bowl 7s. So let's move on and have a look at Imperial Nobility. Okay, so in Blood Bowl 7s, it's a slightly different game. There's no line of scrimmage, there's a smaller pitch, there's a lot of things going on. So have a look at our intro video if you want to kind of get the lowdown on Blood Bowl 7s. But the key here is 7 to 11 players and 0 to 4 positionals only. So that kind of limits the players you can take. The whole idea is that it's a faster and simpler way to play. So when it comes to Imperial Nobility in Blood Bowl 7s, there's a couple of really good strengths there. The blitzers, realistically, are fantastic. And because you have that 0 to 4 positional limit, the fact you can only take 0 to 2 of them isn't the worst thing in the world. It actually kind of takes the edge off, because you kind of want to be spending 1 or 2 other positionals on some of the other toys that the Nobility team has to play with. Now, don't get me wrong, the blitzers are fantastic. Movement 7, Ag 3+, starting with block and catch means that they are going to be really key for stretch plays in 7s. Even a handoff from one to the other is 3+ with a reroll, and those are really good odds. And these guys just get better. You don't get a lot of skills in 7s, but the fact that they have agility on a general means that they are 1 step away from being blodge catchers with movement 7 and strength 3, which in 7s is going to be pretty sweet. The other cool thing is that they can take an ogre. So this team is kind of developed from Bretonnians, and the fact that these guys have now got an ogre is going to be huge in 7s, because if you've watched 7 Super Series, the first season, was there an ogre in the second one? Not entirely sure. Ogres are fantastic in 7s. That movement 5 and agility 4+ just means that they are actually quite mobile. And because you get less cash and less players, the fact that they're strength 5 mighty blow bruisers means that they actually make a huge impact on the game. So the fact that this team has got 2 great players in the blitzers and 1 great player in the ogre really sets them in a pretty good standing. Now, there are some weaknesses to the Nobility team, and they do get a little bit more defined in 7s. So the linemen being Ag 4+ and Armor 8+ means that they are a little bit weak for this environment. Like I said, 0 to 4 positionals, which means it is 3 or more non-positionals, which means you're going to have 3 or more Ag 4+, AV 8+ linemen. They do have Fend, so that's going to shut down all kinds of frenzy nonsense, and actually it means they're going to be able to hold space a little bit better in the 7s environment as well, which is pretty cool. Another downside is that where rerolls are doubled, this is 140,000 now for an Imperial Nobility team. So you don't see a lot of rerolls in 7s anyway, and that 140k basically is a quarter of your team cost. So that's a huge investment, and no sure hands at the beginning. So like I said, 7s is really light on skills normally, so the integral skills like block and sure hands are really important. No sure hands in this environment for this team, so that is going to be an impact as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a look at 4 or 5 different combinations of Nobility players that we could see you running as a team in Blood Bowl 7s. And the first roster we've got for you is the Ogre Mix. So this one comes in at 560. These rosters are all going to be a little bit less than 600. What you spend the extra cash on is entirely down to you. Basically, we're here to give you a guide, and then you can use that cash to flex up a position onto something you slightly prefer and decide whether or not you want to take dedicated fans or assistant coaches. I think given 7s, I would recommend taking the assistant coaches. More often than not, it's going to be a resurrection gameplay kind of format, and those coaches are going to help you get rerolls more than anything else. So I recommend the extra cash going on assistant coaches. However, in the Ogre Mix, we include those players we talked about. 1 Ogre, 2 Blitzers forms a really, really good combat contingent. Ogres are fantastic, and those Blitzers are brilliant. They are almost as good as human Blitzers. They start with catch, which is a slight boon, especially from a stretch play point of view, but where they don't have strength on primary skill, they have agility instead, you end up getting blodge catchers, rather than your kind of classic block guard piece, the block guard mighty blow that you would get on a human team. So that actually does differentiate a little bit. But the fact is, you've got an ogre who's going to be blitzing around having a great time, because Bonehead is really not that bad and it's worth the payoff. And those blitzers with movement 7, edge 3+, strength 3, block and catch means that actually as a pack they're going to be doing a really good job. And because they've got catch, it's definitely worth looking about what else you can run on this team. We've gone for the thrower here. Because you got 560, you can upgrade that to a bodyguard if you want. Same agility, but the thrower has potential. Passing 3+ is not brilliant, but they do have pass. So you're kind of running them in the same way you would have run a human thrower of old. And spoiler alert, we used to run those. No sure hands, which can be a bit of a pain. Running pass, if it's going to be good in an environment, 7s really could be the environment for it to be good in, because you can make that pass, you can make that quick pass action, and then you can redeploy to create a cage. You've only got 7 players, so realistically that thrower being able to play the role of the ball picker-upper and then distributes it, and then going and positioning to be part of a cage or part of a blocker or to go and mark somebody else, it is going to become in handy. But realistically, the real reason you want the thrower is, unless leader is banned in your format, which I don't think it should be, they can get access to leader. So you end up with a 3+ passer, movement 6, agility 3+, reasonable ball carrier, let's not forget. But leader is going to help get a reroll for your team without paying literally the same price as an ogre. They can, however, just take block and turn into a third blitzer for all intents and purposes. This roster is rounded out by 3 linemen. Now, these guys are movement 6, which is pretty decent. They're strength 3, which is pretty decent. Edge 4 is fine. It's not great, and with no rerolls, it's really not great. But the fact that they have movement 6, strength 3, and fend means that they are going to be able to defend well and intercede well, so they're going to be quite useful. If you are looking at some skills for your team, kick or block for the linemen are going to make them slightly better. Leader on the thrower or block is great. Sure hands is something that you can consider, but you're going to be picking up the ball a lot less than you are going to be blocking, for example. The ogre, it's really up to you. If you've got a double, and bear in mind Nobility are a tier 2 team, so the chances of you having a secondary skill available is going to be good. And let me tell you, an ogre with block is fantastic, but if you don't have that, then Juggernaut, because blitzing with him is going to feel real good in 7s, or guard, because the other cool thing about big guys is if it takes a guard piece and you fail your Bonehead, you can still blitz with the blitzers. Blitzers, like we said, dodge is pretty sweet, or if you've got a double, you can look at guard or mighty blow with those, or even tackle to perform the role of a safety. So the ogre mix is a really solid starting point for Nobility in 7s. And our next alternate roster is Combat 4. So this one comes in at 570. Basically, you drop the ogre, and you drop the thrower, and you take 2 bodyguards instead and a spare lineman. So not enough spare cash floating around to get yourself a reroll, but what you do end up here with is 2 blitzers, so that's 2 movement 7, strength 3 block, and 2 bodyguards, which is move 6, strength 3 wrestle. So you end up with 2 block and 2 wrestle in a 7s environment. Now these guys are all 4 of them are edge 3+ as well. So you end up with half of your team, or if you're only deploying your top 7 on the pitch, more than half of your team with a very respectable 3+ agility. But also you get those combat skills in there straight away, and if you are taking a guy down to the ground in 7s, that's a much bigger percentage of the opponent's team that's on the ground and inactive. So being able to clear a path in 7s is going to be pretty sweet. So that wrestle skill available on the bodyguards is going to be useful. And edge 3+ makes them very realistically, you can carry the ball, you can do stuff like that. Wrestle does not combo well as a ball carrier, but it does combo well for a defensive point. So the advantage of this roster is you've got your 2 blitzers who are really going to be your superstars. Then you're backed up basically by a bunch of linemen with fend and some bodyguards with wrestle. So you end up with a kind of positioning heavy team. You've got wrestle to counter basically any piece, and you've got those move 7 blitzers to run around and do great stuff. The other thing to mention is that where these bodyguards start with stand firm on those 2, then you've got a bunch of linemen with fend. When you come to play a defensive series, this team is going to be able to control where your opponent goes, and if you are positioning them okay to be able to counterpunch with those blitzers, it's going to perform really well. Okay, next up we've got the max passing angle. So this roster comes in at 590. essentially what you can do here is you can drop those 2 bodyguards and replace both of them with throwers. It gives you enough cash left over to take an apothecary. Now, not enough to get that reroll, and you've got an extra positional, well, you've got a spare player basically. You lose out on stand firm wrestle, but you gain that pass element, which you shouldn't pass very often because it's going to be 3+ at best. Now, 3+ with a reroll is the trap. Just ask all human sure hands players, and unfortunately Skaven throwers. So the angle here though is that it's max passing. So for an offensive series, you've got that passing ability and you've got that catching ability. That's not the true angle here. The true angle is that's your reserve plan. You've maximized your agility. So you've maximized your agility and you've been able to take that apothecary without dropping any edge at all. Now, because of the price difference between the thrower and the bodyguard, there's not a way to fandangle anybody else in, so you can't quite take a bodyguard instead of a thrower and go for the mix without having to sacrifice without having to sacrifice that apothecary. And the key to the apothecary is it gives you a reserve blitzer, for example. You've got the opportunity to just throw your blitzers around, use them as your main combat pieces, because they are going to be your main combat pieces, but quite frankly having 2 block guys in 7s is kind of fine. Like, it's kind of standard. There are a lot of teams that aren't even going to have that. You don't have the strength, but you do have the angle there with 4 edge players. Those throwers are not bad. They're coming in at strength 3 with agility 3+, passing 3+, and armor 9+ as well. So they perform the role of a reserve lineman pretty amicably. And you have always got the reserve option of just using that pass reroll to get the ball somewhere else quickly. Whether you're throwing it to one of your catch blitzers or whether you're just hooning it away so that you can stop the offense. That's all good, and you're backed up with the apothecary to keep one of your blitzers alive for longer. Okay, now we're going to look at the no-ogre mix. So we saw the ogre mix earlier on, and now we're going to look at what happens if you drop the ogre and take some other stuff instead. So you end up with a pretty chunky roster here. So 2 blitzers, 1 bodyguard, 1 thrower, and 5 linemen. I actually had to go back and check. So that brings you to, aggravatingly, 600 on the dot. So taking that extra lineman, you can't quite afford the apothecary because a lineman of 45k, and this roster takes you to 555. Now you can drop a lineman and you will still have 8 players, and you can spend that 45k on other stuff. So just blitzing in those assistant coaches might not be a terrible thing, but do remember your linemen are armor 8+, and they are gonna die occasionally. So maybe dropping a lineman and taking 4 assistant coaches to shoot for that reroll on the cheering fans coaches result might be the best angle for you. But what this roster gives you is it gives you those 2 blitzers to be the core of what should be the core of most nobility teams. 1 bodyguard to be your reserve piece, to be that wrestle support. So actually you can go and just tag someone you want to tag, and having that wrestle access is going to be really, really useful, backed up with stand firm. So 1 bodyguard for that wrestle, 2 blitzers for that block and move 7, and 1 thrower to run around doing thrower things and just pretending to be a 3rd blitzer. Taking block or leader on the thrower, either of those is going to be really useful. It depends on what your environment is looking like. And 5 linemen is going to mean you've got an absolute ton of reserve players, so you can afford to foul because you've got 2 guys on the bench as well. So when your blitzer or bodyguard takes someone to the ground, run along and put the boot in, because losing a lineman is going to be a lot better than most other players and most other teams losing something from their angle. So don't have the strength of the ogre, have wrestle instead and 1 extra person in the mix. It depends on how wide you want to go with your roster. And last but not least, we have the mix reroll. So we looked at the reroll cost at the beginning of the episode, and 140k is basically the same as the ogre. So if you drop the ogre from the mixed ogre roster and took a reroll instead, what would that leave you with? That would leave you with 1 blitzer, so 1 movement 7 blocker, 1 bodyguard, 1 movement 6 wrestler, 1 thrower to do your throwing and ball carrying, 4 linemen, and then that 1 reroll to give you something extra. Now, this is a way to cheat that reroll in, and then you can go and use block on your thrower, for example, or leader to get that 2nd reroll. Personally, I'm a much bigger fan of having the ogre, but I realise that I have I prefer having the big guy there on the team rather than having it not. But I'm probably not. I think that's probably swaying me a bit too much. This roster, all these players are going to do what they need to do. That reroll just costs you a blitzer. it costs you an ogre, and that seems absolutely massive to me. But that is the risk, and that is the challenge of 7s, is you can take this bit of consistency, but would you rather have one reroll for 1 turn per half, or 1 ogre for every turn every half, except that sometimes he boneheads? I don't know, it's down to you. It's going to be no surprise that I am a big fan of the ogre mix roster. I think 1 ogre, 2 blitzers and 1 thrower gives you a bit of everything. You're backed up with 3 linemen for that fend, but this roster gives you the feel of nobility. Throwers are underpowered. They are a little bit underpowered. The blitzers are a little bit overpowered, but not as great as they could be, and you've got that ogre there for absolute muscle. So I like this roster, or you can do the thing where you swap the ogre out for a bodyguard and an extra lineman if you are that way inclined. That's absolutely fine. I like this roster. It gives you a ton of strength and a ton of opportunity. And realistically, the blitzers, the thrower, even the ogres, they can all do mighty things. So that's 4 players on this team that actually are going to be scoring and or removal threats, and that makes them a pretty potent force in 7s. Honestly, I cannot wait to get the nobility team to the 7s pitch. They are tier 2, and I think they're gonna perform tier 2, but they are gonna be brawling. And if you are a fan of a slight underdog, not massively, just a slight, they're gonna be punching above their weight a lot of the time, and they're gonna pull it off, and that's gonna be absolutely awesome. Probably being swayed by the miniatures, but dude, I am looking forward to nobility in 7s. New team, new combo of players, new challenge. Super excited. Anyway guys, I'm going to wrap up now. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know of what you think of nobility in 7s, and if there's any other rosters you like the idea of. And we'll be back tomorrow with more Blood Bowl content. Thanks for watching. Thanks very much for watching. We really appreciate your support. If you want to support the show even further, please like and subscribe. It really helps us out. Or come and join us in our Patreon, link below, where you get early access to our content and monthly competitions. See you later.